Hello Year 7 and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to be looking at the next step in castle building. We're going to be able to explain why Motte and Bailey castles were replaced and explain the key features of the new kind of castle. I'd like to start off today with a quick recap of last lesson. Can you jot down on a piece of paper some of your ideas about what the advantages and disadvantages of a Motte and Bailey castle were? So what was good about it, what was bad about it? Now, the main advantage of a castle is that it allows William to control the country. Castles were extremely hard to take, so the English normal citizens, the peasants, who didn't like the French invasion, could be controlled through a series of castles that were strategically placed across the country. Each of these castles could control many miles around it. If a rebellion broke out, armed troops could be sent from each castle to quell the rebellion in the area. If they came under attack and seemed unable to put it down, they could retreat to the castle, and the castle was a great place to defend against that rebellion. Why was it such a good place to defend then? Well, firstly, we've got its various features. We've got a moat that would have been extremely difficult to cross if you were wearing heavy armour. You'd drown in it. We've got large wooden walls called the palisade, which protected the bailey and would prevent people getting onto the bailey. We've got the bailey itself, which would provide food and shelter, had all of the supplies needed for the soldiers to live off for a few weeks at least. We have the drawbridge, which would have been raised, so preventing anyone crossing the moat. We then, of course, have the motte, very steep, difficult to climb if you're attacking. And finally, on the top, we have the keep. This would have been strongly fortified, good defences, and even if the bailey fell, the defenders could retreat to the keep and hold out there until their attackers gave up. So, what's the problems with a Motte and Bailey? Well, one of the key problems was that it was made of wood. Now, this is because they needed to put these up very quickly in the immediate aftermath of the invasion. They therefore made good use of the materials that were around and constructed things as fast as possible. The wood was eventually replaced by stone, however. Why is this? Well, firstly, wood can be burnt to the ground, so not perhaps the best defensive material. Secondly, stone is stronger than wood, so stone was a great improvement, as we can see here from this castle in Devon. I'd like you now to write down as many reasons the castle in front of you is different from the Motte and Bailey castle we looked at last lesson. Here it is. Today then we are going to be looking at this new kind of castle. It's known as the Stone Keep or the Square Keep Castle. Square Keep castles had a lot of advantages. They were often larger and more comfortable. They were also very well defended. Now, this is because when you start to build out of stone, the structure itself becomes much heavier, which meant you could no longer put it on a motte. Okay, the motte was too unstable, so they had to abandon the motte. Square keeps were therefore built flat on the ground. Now, this meant that they would be a lot easier to attack, so they had to come up with new defensive features. Now, hopefully, in this image, you can spot lots of different defensive features. I'd like you to pause the video and create a bullet point list. I think there are at least 10 there visible. Off you go. What can you find? Right, firstly then, let's think about the walls. Now these walls are stone walls, so they can't be burnt down. They are really thick. They could be up to 7 meters thick, and they were very high. Being so high allowed you to see attackers from a long way off, so you'd be able to prepare, gave you great height advantage. At the base of the wall, you can see it slightly splays out. Now that splay out bit, that's known as the batter, and it allows you to drop things onto attackers at the base of the wall there. When you drop them, they'll bounce off the wall and into the face of your attackers. On the top of the wall, we have battlements there, and the battlements would allow you to shelter as you dropped things onto the attackers below. Being on the ground, they've moved the door up. So instead of the door being on the ground floor, it's now on the first floor. This is because attacking on some stairs is a lot harder. You can also see that there's a little kind of black bit at the entrance there. Now, sometimes in Stonekeep castles, you would have a little sort of gap, and they'd put a drawbridge over it with a portcullis. So you could lift up the drawbridge, put down the portcullis, which is like a metal grate, and it would hamper your attackers reaching the door of the keep. This is really important because the door of the keep is the greatest weakness of the keep. They also protected the windows by making them really, really thin. They put in thin arrow slits so that you could fire arrows out, but nobody could fire arrows back at you. They put in murder holes either side of the door. Now, murder holes were basically overhanging areas of masonry from which you could drop things down onto the attackers below you. Now, the things that they would drop might include big boulders, but it also might include things like boiling tar or boiling water to harm your attackers that way. They also introduced spiral staircases, which I hope you can see on the left-hand side there. Now, that spiral staircase gives an advantage to the defender. It helps them stop an attacker being able to move easily through the keep. You can see at the bottom of the keep we have lots of barrels there, lots of space for storage of provisions. Now, this would be food, so dried food that would last a long time. You can also hopefully see that there is a well there as well. A well for water. It was important that you had access to food and water within the keep because an attack, also known as a siege, might last not a day, not even a few days, not even a few weeks. It might last a number of months. Now, you can't just pop out to Sainsbury's. Excuse me, attackers, I'm just going to go get my bread and milk. So you had to have all of the food and water you needed to survive within the keep itself. There is also a chapel within the keep there, and that's because similarly you couldn't go out to church, so you had to have your religious needs catered for within the chapel. Religion was really important, so it was very important to the defenders that they had a space to pray. On Show My Homework, I've attached an image of a square keep castle that has little boxes for you to write some labels to show each of the different defensive features of the castle. I'd like you to complete this task now. Now, I'd like you to read the information sheet on the stone keep castles and answer questions 2 to 8. Please copy out the question first and then answer it below. Lastly, could you please write me a P paragraph? Why was Motte and Bailey castles replaced by the stone keep castles? Your point sentence is on the board. Can you put an example of an advantage of the stone keep and explain why this was an advantage? Well done, Year 7.